The message flashed across the screen of Mining Station Delta 7's common area. Warning: fragile species on board. Jack stared at the bright red text and sighed. After 6 months on the station, he still couldn't get used to being labeled as breakable cargo. Around him, the other workers moved carefully, their crystalline and metallic bodies reflecting the station's harsh lighting. A group of silicon-based beings whispered among themselves, their crystal formations tinkling like wind chimes as they pointed in his direction. Jack pretended not to notice, focusing instead on his morning maintenance checklist. Remember, maintain safe distance from the human. The station's AI announced for the 3rd time that day. Their calcium-based structure is susceptible to damage from minor impacts. Rock, Jack's working partner, moved closer with the careful precision of someone handling extremely delicate equipment. His crystalline body sparkled with bands of purple and blue. Jack, friend, perhaps you should rest today. The mining shaft temperature has increased by 2 degrees. I'm fine, Rock, Jack replied, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. Humans can handle much more than a small temperature change. He picked up his tools, noting how the other aliens flinched when he moved quickly. Their concern would have been touching if it wasn't so frustrating. The truth was, Jack had fought hard to get this job. The Galactic Federation classified humans as a Class C fragile species, which meant most space stations wouldn't even consider hiring them. It had taken 3 years of applications and a stack of special waivers before Mining Station Delta 7 had given him a chance. Blue, the metallic-skinned supervisor, floated over to their workstation. Her silver surface rippled with concern. Jack, the new safety protocols require all fragile species to wear double-layer protection suits in the mining areas. She extended a protective suit that looked thick enough to survive a supernova. Blue, I can barely move in that thing, Jack protested. How am I supposed to fix anything? He held up his standard-issue safety suit, which was already more than adequate for the conditions. This is rated for temperatures twice what we have down there. The supervisor's surface flickered with uncertainty patterns, but the regulations clearly state. The regulations were written by people who think humans will shatter if they sneeze too hard. Jack interrupted. He immediately regretted his sharp tone when he saw Blue's metallic skin ripple with distress patterns. A small crowd had gathered around them now. The crystalline beings clustered together, their faceted bodies creating a kaleidoscope of worried light patterns. The metallic species stayed back, their surfaces showing various shades of concern. Jack took a deep breath and tried a different approach. Look, I understand everyone's worried, but humans have been working in harsh conditions for thousands of years. We built entire cities in deserts and Arctic regions back on Earth. We can handle more than you think. Blue's surface swirled with consideration patterns, but your species is so soft. You have no protective outer shell, no reinforced skeleton structure. Even your atmosphere requirements are extremely narrow. As if to prove her point, a small mining drone bumped into a nearby table. The crystalline beings immediately formed a protective circle around Jack, their bodies creating a sparkling barrier. Jack had to bite back a laugh. He'd survived worse bumps walking to work back on Earth. I appreciate the concern, Jack said carefully. But this overprotection is making it hard for me to do my job. I'm an engineer, not a glass sculpture. He picked up his toolkit, deliberately moving at normal speed, despite the collective gasp from his colleagues. The station's AI chimed in again. Reminder: human specimen showing signs of increased activity. All personnel maintain safe distance. I'm not a specimen, Jack muttered, heading toward the mining shaft. Rock hurried after him, crystal body chiming with worry tones. As they entered the lift to the lower levels, Jack caught his reflection in the polished wall. He saw what they saw: a soft, pink-skinned creature with no natural armor, no crystalline strength, no metallic resilience. But they didn't understand what they were looking at. They saw fragility where there was adaptability, weakness where there was endurance. Little did they know that humanity's greatest strength lay in what they perceived as weakness. Jack smiled slightly, remembering his grandfather's words. "Son, it's not about being unbreakable. It's about being able to bend without breaking." The lift descended into the station's depths, carrying them down to another day of careful movements and worried looks. But Jack knew that someday, somehow, he would show them what humans were really capable of. They called humans fragile, but they had never seen a human truly tested. Not yet. The mining shaft hummed with activity as Jack and Rock made their way through the twisting tunnels of Delta 7's lower levels. Their boots clanked against the metal floor, the sound echoing off walls embedded with glowing strips of safety lighting. The air grew warmer as they descended, carrying the familiar scent of heated metal and mineral dust. "Jack, friend," Rock's crystalline body chimed with concern. "The temperature is now 3 degrees above standard. Perhaps we should request a cooling unit for your comfort." His crystal segments shifted in what Jack had learned was a gesture of worry. Jack wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "It's just like a summer day back home, Rock. Trust me, I'm fine." He stopped at a junction to check his tablet, reviewing the day's repair assignments. A faulty mineral separator had been acting up in Section G, causing delays in processing the valuable ores they extracted from the volatile planet below. As they walked, other workers pressed themselves against the walls to let them pass. Jack noticed how they stared at his exposed face, visible through his helmet's transparent front. Most species on the station wore fully enclosed suits or didn't need protection at all. Their natural bodies adapted to extreme conditions. The mineral separator came into view, its massive frame dominated by sorting chambers and processing belts. Blue was already there, her metallic skin reflecting the red warning lights flashing around the malfunctioning machine. 2 crystalline technicians stood nearby, their bodies resonating with frustrated tones as they failed to identify the problem. "The inner chamber is too hot for safe entry," Blue announced as Jack approached. "We must wait for it to cool before attempting repairs." Her surface rippled with authority patterns. Jack checked the temperature readings on his tablet. 120 degrees. "That's hot, but not impossible. I can handle it for short periods." The crystalline technicians' bodies rang with alarm tones. One of them, a younger worker named Spark, stepped forward. "But the safety protocols clearly state that organics must not be exposed to temperatures above 90 degrees, I know," Jack interrupted. "But those protocols were written for silicon-based life forms. Humans evolved on a planet with deserts reaching way higher temperatures than this." He was already checking his suit seals, preparing for entry. Blue's surface swirled with conflict patterns. "The regulations will cause us to lose a full day's production," Jack finished. "Look, I'll take basic precautions. 20 minutes is all I need to find the problem." The others watched in horror as Jack attached a cooling pack to his suit and checked his oxygen supply. Rock's crystals chimed a worried melody. "Jack, friend, your species' tendency toward risk-taking behaviors is well documented. Perhaps we should consider alternative solutions." Jack smiled inside his helmet. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. He opened the access panel, feeling the wave of heat wash over him. It was hot, certainly, but nothing compared to the time he'd helped repair a furnace back on Earth. Inside the chamber, Jack worked quickly and efficiently. His smaller size, a trait the aliens often saw as a disadvantage, allowed him to squeeze through gaps the crystalline workers couldn't navigate. The heat was uncomfortable but manageable, and his natural sweat cooling system helped him cope better than his colleagues could understand. Through the chamber's walls, he could hear the worried discussions outside. The aliens were probably calculating his survival chances or preparing emergency medical procedures. Jack focused on the task at hand, tracing the separator's power circuits until he found the problem. A simple misaligned connection that was causing the whole system to overheat. 15 minutes later, he emerged from the chamber, his suit's cooling system working overtime, but otherwise fine. The gathered crowd of workers stared at him in amazement as the separator hummed back to life behind him, its warning lights fading to a healthy green. Impossible, Spark chimed, his crystal body vibrating with disbelief. The heat levels in there should have caused severe distress to organic systems. Jack removed his helmet, wiping the sweat from his face. You'd be surprised what humans can handle when we need to. Sometimes being adaptable is better than being indestructible. Blue's surface showed complex patterns of recalculation. Perhaps, she said slowly, we need to reassess some of our assumptions about human capabilities. As they headed back to the main level, Jack could hear the crystalline workers discussing what they'd seen in their musical language. Rock walked beside him, unusually quiet, his crystal segments shifting in what looked like deep thought. You know, Rock finally chimed, there is an old saying among my people. The strongest crystal is not always the most useful. I think I understand that better now. Jack grinned. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to see that being human meant more than being fragile. 3 days after the separator incident, Jack noticed something odd about the station's vibration patterns. He felt it first in his morning coffee, tiny ripples forming on the surface when there should have been none. Delta 7 stabilizers usually kept the station perfectly still, even during the planet's frequent storms. He mentioned it to Rock during their morning inspection route. Something feels off today. The station's vibrating more than usual. Rock's crystalline body rang out a checking tone, his natural resonance searching for abnormalities. My sensors detect nothing unusual, Jack friend. Perhaps your fragile liquid detection system is malfunctioning. He gestured to Jack's coffee cup with a hint of what had become their shared joke about human fragility. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling. Years of working in Earth's mines had taught him to trust his instincts. He pulled up the station's seismic readings on his tablet, frowning at the data. Look at these patterns. They're different from our normal background vibrations. Blue drifted over, her metallic surface catching the morning light. The automated systems show all readings within acceptable parameters. She paused, noticing Jack's concerned expression. Though perhaps we should investigate, given your species' known sensitivity to environmental changes. Jack suppressed a sigh. Even when they were trying to take him seriously, they still saw everything through the lens of human fragility. It's not about sensitivity, he explained. It's about experience. These patterns remind me of something I saw before a mine collapsed back on Earth. The morning shift continued, but Jack kept checking the readings between repairs. The vibrations grew stronger, though still barely noticeable to anyone but him. He started marking their locations on a station map, forming a pattern that made his stomach sink. We need to check the lower mining shafts, he announced during the midday break. These vibrations are forming a pattern that could indicate structural stress. The other workers in the break room turned to look at him. A group of crystalline beings chimed nervously among themselves. One of them, Spark, stepped forward. But the morning report showed all support systems functioning normally. Perhaps the human is being overcautious. Overcautious. Jack pulled up his map on the main display. Look at these points. They're forming a line directly under our main drilling operation. On Earth, this kind of pattern often preceded. A sudden tremor cut him off, stronger than the others. Around the room, metallic workers rippled with surprise patterns, while crystalline beings rang out alarm tones. Blue's surface swirled with concern as she accessed the station's data feeds. A minor seismic event, she announced. Well within our safety margins. The station's reinforced structure can withstand forces far greater than this. Her tone was meant to be reassuring, but Jack noticed she was mainly addressing him, as if he were the one needing comfort. Jack walked to the nearest viewport, looking down at the planet below. The usual swirling storms looked different somehow, more concentrated near their drilling sites. He'd seen something similar during his mining days on Earth, right before. Another tremor shook the station, this one strong enough to rattle equipment. Warning lights flashed, casting red shadows across worried faces. The crystalline beings huddled together, their bodies humming with nervous energy. The human's concern appears justified. Rock chimed, his crystal segments shifting in agitation. Perhaps we should. A third tremor hit, harder than the others. This time, the station's stabilizers whined as they fought to maintain balance. In the distance, Jack heard the deep groan of metal under stress. "We need to evacuate the lower levels," he said, already moving toward the command console. "These aren't random tremors. The pattern suggests. Our station is rated for forces 10 times this magnitude," interrupted one of the metallic supervisors. "There's no need to disrupt operations over what's clearly a minor planetary disturbance, especially based on organic intuition." Jack fought back his frustration. "This isn't about intuition. It's about pattern recognition. I've seen this before. These vibrations, the way they're escalating, the concentration of the storms below, it all points to something bigger building up." Blue's surface showed conflict patterns as she processed Jack's words against her programming. "The safety protocols don't call for evacuation at these levels of seismic activity, even for fragile species." Before Jack could argue further, the station's AI made an announcement. "Warning. Unusual energy readings detected in mining shaft 7. All non-essential personnel please remain in your current locations while we investigate." Jack looked at his station map again, noting how the vibration patterns all seemed to converge on that exact shaft. He knew they were running out of time, but how could he make them understand? In their eyes, he was just a fragile human who was probably overreacting to a minor disturbance. The next tremor, when it came, would prove him right. But by then, it would almost be too late. The disaster struck with shocking speed. One moment, Jack was arguing with Blue about evacuation protocols. The next, the entire station shuddered with an impact that sent everyone stumbling. Warning sirens blared as red emergency lights flooded every corridor. Multiple hull breaches detected in lower mining shafts. The station AI announced, its calm voice at odds with the chaos unfolding around them. "Plasma storm intensity has increased by 300%. All personnel evacuate to emergency stations immediately." Jack grabbed his tablet, watching in horror as data streamed across the screen. The planet below had unleashed a massive plasma storm, unlike anything in the station's records. The storm's energy was feeding back into their drilling sites, creating a cascade of seismic reactions. "Structural failure in mining shaft 7. The AI's voice rose in urgency. "Emergency bulkheads engaging. Warning. 23 workers detected in affected areas." Blue's metallic surface rippled with panic patterns. "Impossible. Our shields should have protected against any storm of this magnitude." Around her, crystalline workers chimed in distress as the station shook again. Jack was already moving. "Rock, I need access to the environmental controls. Now." His fingers flew across the console as Rock helped him bypass the safety protocols. The station's schematics appeared, showing the trapped workers' locations in the lower levels. Temperature in affected sections reaching critical levels. The AI warned. "Warning. Heat shields failing in sections 5 through 8. A group of metallic supervisors huddled near the main display, their surfaces showing calculation patterns. "The rescue pods can't approach those sections," one announced. "The heat levels would compromise their integrity. We must wait for the storm to pass." "They don't have that long," Jack said, studying the readings. The trapped workers were mostly crystalline beings, their bodies already stressed by the rising temperatures. In these conditions, they would start to crack within minutes. Another impact rocked the station. Spark, who had been monitoring the communication channels, chimed in alarm. "We've lost contact with 2 groups in the lower levels. Their emergency beacons show critical stress patterns." Jack looked at the temperature readings again, then at the station's layout. There was a maintenance shaft that ran parallel to the affected areas. If he could reach it, he might be able to manually override the emergency bulkheads and create an escape route. "The maintenance shaft," he said, pointing to the schematic. "It's narrow, but it should still be accessible." Blue's surface flashed with warning patterns. "The heat levels in that area are beyond safe limits for any species, especially humans. Your biological structure would begin to break down almost immediately. But my size means I'm the only one who can fit, Jack argued. Your metallic forms would melt, and the crystalline workers would shatter. At least I have a chance. Rock's crystal body rang with distress. Jack friend, the temperatures there are approaching the melting point of several metals. Your protective suit would only help for moments. Another tremor shook the station. On the screens, more warning lights flashed as the trapped workers' life signs began to weaken. They were running out of time. I'm going, Jack said, already heading for the emergency equipment locker. He pulled out a heat suit, knowing it wouldn't be enough but hoping it would buy him the minutes he needed. This is highly irregular, Blue protested, her surface showing extreme concern patterns. The safety protocols explicitly forbid sending fragile species into such conditions. Your chances of survival are. Sometimes being fragile means being able to bend instead of break, Jack interrupted, sealing his suit. Sometimes it means being able to go where stronger beings can't. The station shook again as he reached the access hatch to the maintenance shaft. Behind him, he could hear the crystalline workers chiming in what he recognized as their version of a prayer. Rock stood nearby, his crystal body glowing with worry. Jack friend, Rock chimed softly, your species never fails to surprise us. But please, survive this surprise. Jack nodded, checked his suit's seals one final time, and opened the hatch. A wave of heat hit him even through the protective layers. The maintenance shaft stretched before him, already glowing dull red in places from the heat. 23 lives were counting on the fragile human who was about to attempt the impossible. As Jack entered the shaft, he smiled grimly. It was time to show them what human fragility really meant. The heat hit Jack like a physical wall as he crawled through the maintenance shaft. His suit's temperature gauge was already climbing into the red zone, and he barely started. Sweat rolled down his face inside his helmet, and each breath felt like drinking hot air. Jack friend, your vital signs are becoming concerning. Rock's voice crackled through his comm unit. Perhaps we should. Not now, Jack grunted, pushing forward. The metal walls around him glowed with a dull redness that grew brighter as he moved deeper into the affected area. His suit's cooling system whined as it fought against the rising temperature. The station's AI continued its warnings. Critical temperature threshold exceeded in sections 5 through 8. Crystalline life form integrity compromised. Estimated time to structural failure, 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Jack checked his tablet's screen, now barely visible through the heat distortion. The trapped workers were gathered in two groups, their life signs weakening. He was closer to the first group, just past the next junction. A sudden burst of steam from a ruptured cooling line forced him to press against the shaft's wall. The metal was hot enough to feel through his suit's insulation. Warning indicators flashed across his helmet display as his suit's outer layer began to degrade. Temperature exceeding suit safety parameters, the AI announced in his ear. Recommended action. Immediate retreat. Jack ignored the warning, pushing forward. The shaft narrowed, and he had to wriggle through sideways. His suit scraped against the hot metal, and he felt the heat seeping through worn spots in the insulation. First group should be below me now, he panted into his comm. Rock, guide me to the manual override. Rock's usually musical voice was tight with worry. 3 meters ahead, then down. But Jack friend, the metal in that section is approaching its melting point. Even your suit cannot. Just tell me when I'm there, Jack interrupted. He couldn't afford to think about the impossibility of what he was doing. The lives of the trapped workers depended on his success. He found the override panel, its surface almost too hot to touch. The manual controls were designed for emergency use, but probably not in conditions like this. Jack's gloves began to smoke as he worked the mechanisms. Warning, the AI announced. Suit integrity at 40%. Biological damage imminent. The override finally gave way with a screech of protesting metal. Below him, a section of bulkhead groaned open, revealing a group of crystalline workers. Their bodies were already showing stress fractures from the heat. "Move! Now!" Jack shouted through the station's emergency channels. The crystalline beings didn't hesitate, their bodies chiming in panic as they rushed through the opening toward cooler sections. But he couldn't stop to watch them escape. The second group was still trapped, their life signs growing weaker by the second. Jack forced himself to move, even as his suit's integrity warnings became more urgent. "Jack, your core temperature is reaching dangerous levels." Blue's worried voice came through the comm. "You must retreat now. No organic being can survive these conditions." The air in his suit was becoming stifling. Each breath was a struggle, and dark spots danced at the edges of his vision. But he could see the access point to the second group just ahead. "Almost there," he gasped. The final stretch of shaft was the worst yet. The metal under him sagged slightly with the heat, and his suit's external sensors had stopped working entirely. The second override was partially melted. Jack's gloves were falling apart as he gripped the emergency handle. With a cry of effort that was part pain and part desperation, he forced it to move. The bulkhead below opened with a hiss of superheated air. The trapped crystalline workers looked up, their bodies already showing deep stress fractures. They hesitated for just a moment at the sight of the human who had come through hell to reach them. "Go!" Jack's voice was barely a whisper now. His suit was failing, and he could feel the heat on his skin like 1,000 burning needles. "Follow the markers to safety." As the last worker escaped, Jack's vision began to blur. He had done it, but now his own situation was critical. The way back seemed impossibly long, and his strength was fading fast. The last thing he heard before consciousness slipped away was Rock's panicked chiming through the comm. "Emergency medical team to maintenance shaft entrance. The human, our friend. He needs help." Then darkness took him, and Jack fell into a place where even the burning heat couldn't follow. The medical bay of mining station Delta 7 was unusually crowded. Crystalline beings lined the walls, their bodies humming soft healing tones. Metallic workers drifted near the entrance, their surfaces rippling with concerned patterns. At the center of it all lay Jack, surrounded by medical equipment that beeped and whirred. "His core temperature is still elevated," the medical eye reported, "but dropping steadily. Cellular damage is within recoverable parameters." The machine's cool voice echoed through the quiet room. Rock hadn't left Jack's side since the rescue team had pulled him from the maintenance shaft. His crystal body was still giving off distress chimes, creating a soft musical backdrop to the medical equipment's beeping. "I don't understand," one of the rescued workers said, their crystalline form showing healing cracks. "Our bodies began to fracture in those temperatures. The human's biological structure should have failed completely." Blue drifted closer to Jack's bed, her metallic surface showing deep analysis patterns. "Perhaps we have misunderstood something fundamental about human physiology. Their adaptability seems to extend far beyond our initial calculations." The medical bay's doors slid open as more station workers arrived. Many were from the rescued groups, their crystal bodies still bearing stress marks from their near disaster. They gathered around Jack's bed, their combined healing tones filling the room with a gentle symphony. "He knew," Spark said quietly, his crystal segments shifting. "He knew about the danger before our sensors detected it. And then he did what none of us could do." The young worker's tone carried a mix of awe and confusion. Jack stirred slightly, his vital signs flickering on the displays above his bed. The medical eye immediately adjusted several settings. Patient showing signs of consciousness, beginning recovery protocols. The assembled workers watched in fascination as Jack's eyes slowly opened. He blinked several times, focusing on the crowd around his bed. A small smile crossed his face when he saw Rock's worried form nearby. "Did everyone?" His voice was rough, but clear. "Did everyone make it out?" "All 23 workers were saved," Blue confirmed, her surface shimmering with emotion patterns, "thanks to actions that, by all our calculations, should have been impossible." Jack tried to sit up, but gentle restraining fields held him in place. "Humans aren't as fragile as you think," he managed to say. "We're just different kind of strong." One of the rescued workers stepped forward, their crystal body bearing several healing fractures. "We have seen this strength now. In temperatures that would shatter our forms and melt metallic bodies, you remained functional. How is this possible?" "Humans evolved on a world of extremes," Jack explained, his voice growing stronger. "We learned to adapt instead of resist, to bend instead of break." He paused, looking at the gathered crowd. Sometimes being able to change and adapt is more useful than being unbreakable. The station's chief administrator, a tall metallic being, moved to the front of the group. "The Galactic Federation has requested a full report on today's events. They are particularly interested in reviewing their classification of human capabilities." A subtle change went through the crowd. Crystal beings chimed thoughtfully, while metallic workers' surfaces showed contemplation patterns. They were seeing Jack, seeing humans, in a new light. "Your actions have caused us to question many assumptions," Blue said, her surface showing complex emotional patterns. "We thought your species fragile because you lack our physical durability. We never considered that this very characteristic might allow you to succeed where we would fail." Rock's crystal body finally stopped emitting distressed tones. "Jack friend," he chimed softly, "you have shown us that there are many kinds of strength. Perhaps it is we who have been fragile in our thinking." The medical eye interrupted with another report. "Patient's recovery exceeding expected parameters. Cellular regeneration proceeding at optimal levels." The machine's tone carried a hint of surprise, as if human resilience was still confounding its predictions. Jack looked around at the gathered workers, no longer colleagues who treated him like he might break, but friends who had seen what humans were truly capable of. The station hummed quietly around them, its systems restored and stable, while below, the plasma storms continued their eternal dance around the mining planet. "So," he said with a slight grin, "does this mean I don't have to wear the extra thick safety suit anymore?" The room filled with the musical laughter of crystal beings and the shimmering amusement patterns of metallic workers. They had called humans fragile, but now they understood. Sometimes the strongest material isn't the one that never breaks, but the one that can endure, adapt, and recover. 3 weeks after the incident, mining station Delta 7 had changed in subtle but significant ways. The warning signs about fragile species still flashed on display screens, but now they carried a different message. "Caution, human worker present. Unexpected capabilities may occur." Jack stood at his usual spot in the morning briefing room, drinking his coffee while reviewing the day's assignments. Around him, the other workers no longer maintained their once careful distance. Instead, they clustered nearby, asking questions about Earth and human adaptability with genuine curiosity. "The Galactic Federation report has been finalized," Blue announced as she drifted into the room, her metallic surface gleaming with satisfaction patterns. "They have officially updated their classification of human capabilities. Jack, would you like to read it?" She projected the document into the air, its holographic text glowing softly. "Human classification amended from Class C fragile species to Class A adaptive species. Note: human resilience and problem-solving capabilities make them uniquely suited for crisis response and extreme condition operations." Rock's crystal body chimed with pleasure. "Jack friend, your actions have changed how the entire galaxy views your species. Already, 3 other mining stations have requested human workers. Let's hope they don't expect every human to walk through fire," Jack said with a laugh, but he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. The change in classification would open doors for other humans who wanted to work in space. Spark, whose crystal body still showed faint traces of the stress fractures from the accident, moved closer. "The new training protocols you suggested have been implemented across all Federation mining operations. They now include sections on recognizing subtle environmental changes that organic beings might detect before our sensors." The morning shift began, but it was different from those before the accident. The crystalline workers no longer chimed an alarm when Jack moved quickly, and the metallic beings had stopped constantly checking their environmental sensors around him. Instead, they worked together, each species contributing their unique strengths to the team. "Watch this," Jack said, as he demonstrated a new repair technique to a group of young crystal workers. "Sometimes you need flexible tools rather than the strongest ones. It's all about adapting to the situation." The workers chimed in, understanding their previous prejudices about human fragility forgotten. Later that day, as Jack and Rock inspected a newly installed safety system, a message came through the station's communications network. The Federation Council had approved a new initiative, a program to study and document unique species capabilities, with humans leading the research. "They want you to help write the new safety protocols," Blue said, her surface showing pride patterns. "Your experience here has shown that our previous understanding of species capabilities was too rigid." Jack looked out at the mining planet below, its storms still swirling in their endless dance. "You know what's funny?" he said. "Back on Earth, we were always the ones in awe of alien species. Your crystalline strength, your metallic resilience. We thought those were the only kinds of strength that mattered." Rock's crystal body resonated with a thoughtful tone. "And we believed that your lack of such features made you fragile. We were all wrong in our own ways." The station hummed around them, its rhythms now familiar and comfortable. In the distance, a group of new workers was arriving, including, Jack noticed with satisfaction, 2 humans. They would find a very different station from the one he had first encountered. "Life finds a way to adapt," Jack said, remembering something his grandfather used to say. "That's the real strength, not being unbreakable, but being able to change, to learn, to overcome." Blue's surface rippled with agreement patterns. Perhaps that is why the universe created so many different types of life, each with their own strengths, their own ways of surviving. The day shift continued, but now there was a new understanding among the crew. The crystalline beings still chimed their beautiful songs, the metallic workers still flowed with their liquid grace, but they worked alongside their human colleagues as equals, each bringing their unique capabilities to their shared tasks. As Jack watched the new human workers being introduced to the crew, he smiled. They wouldn't have to prove themselves the way he had. The galaxy now understood that human fragility was really flexibility, that their perceived weakness was actually adaptability, and that sometimes the strongest beings weren't the ones who never broke, but the ones who knew how to bend, adapt, and overcome. The warning signs still flashed their messages about human workers, but now they carried a note of respect rather than concern. After all, as everyone on Mining Station Delta 7 had learned, you never really knew what humans were capable of until you gave them a chance to show you.